Essentially, the compromise here on the debate microphones is Trump gets to keep the mics muted, but his mic has to be muted for the entire debate. Problem solved. We'll get back to the debate and why Trump's transparent attempt to back out of it again seems to have surprised the political media industrial complex again. But first, that rare day when the polling really is startling. The full Reichstag-Fire-level propaganda site Red State may have commissioned, certainly got first access to, a poll showing Kamala Harris leading Trump 52-45 among likely voters, 7 points, 50-46 among registered voters. That is outside the margin of error, according to the head of the firm which is so right-wing that the pollster's pinned tweet is about how in 2011 he predicted that Trump would become president someday. The polling was completed Saturday, and the piece at Red State is so filled with caveats that it's just this side of the pollster self-flagellating. And yet, Harris, with everything going in her favor, is still not pulling away from Trump, writes Doug Kaplan, who, try as he might, cannot escape his own numbers. She is on an incredible winning streak right now. They also did favorability scores. They claim Harris is at 50-50 and Trump is only 11 points underwater. The biggest factor, writes Kaplan Strategies, helping Harris is how she has neutralized the immigration issue. In both polls, immigration was the fourth most important issue, or rather, only 10% told us it was their number one. I think you have the gist of this now. He keeps telling the fascists what the numbers actually say, then he offers them excuses for those numbers. There is even a vaguely worded detail about what impact the RFK Jr. endorsement will have on Trump's numbers going forward, which is kind of weird because their poll was in the field Friday when Kennedy accepted Trump's bribe, and Saturday, the day after he endorsed him. Kaplan claims his poll shows 20% of likely voters were more likely to vote for Trump based on a Kennedy endorsement, which could mean anything because A, he already endorsed him, and B, Kaplan is not saying 20% of undecided voters are saying this, just 20% of all voters, which would include people who were already likely to vote for Trump and which conceivably could consist only of people who were already likely to vote for Trump. Also on polling, the weekly update from Morning Consult has shown no convention bump for Harris, or maybe just a continuation of all the previous bumps. It is unchanged, same as last week, Harris 48, Trump 44. But remarkably, there are signs of a Tim Walz bump. His favorability in Morning Consult was at 39% and +3 before the convention. It is at 42% and now +6 after it. The polls continue to be so uniformly bad for Trump, even the cooked ones are bad for Trump, that today the Trump campaign begins rolling out TV ads for him on Fox, MSNBC, CNN, and a few others on cable in West Palm Beach, Florida. It is hard to tell if the campaign is seeing more of those hints that we saw last week that Harris really is kind of moving towards being competitive in Florida, or if this ad buy is just to calm their candidate down at Mar-a-Lago as he continues to act as if he's been suffering a mini stroke once an average of every 8 hours and 27 minutes or so. Hey, look on the bright side. Maybe it's both. While we are here in polling land, Echelon, the only pollsters ever to complain when I complimented their work, has Trump ahead nationally 49-48. Tip, a less red meat Republican pollster, has Harris ahead in Michigan by 2, but it has Alyssa Slotkin ahead in Michigan by 10 in the Senate race. The Republican dark money group Red Eagle commissioned a poll in which claims Trump is ahead in Pennsylvania by 1. The Washington Post average of swing state polls has her ahead in Pennsylvania by 2. Also, that's ahead in Michigan by 1 in the Washington Post average, ahead in Wisconsin by 3, trailing by 1 in Arizona and North Carolina, trailing by 2 in Nevada, trailing by 3 in Georgia. In each of those states, The Post average of polls shows in the 5 weeks since the president stepped out of the race, a swing to Harris of between 2.8 points and 3.9 points. Again, these are from an average of the polls in the swing states, not just a Washington Post poll. The other news here, the Wisconsin Supreme Court says Jill Stein can stay on the ballot there, so the Kremlin is happy. And Tulsi Gabbard has endorsed Trump, so justifiably panicky Trumpists can now pretend Gabbard is a Democrat or a liberal. What I must mention I am not seeing yet and really want to see is actual concrete results about whether or not the Kennedy endorsement is playing at all in the polling. I mean, that 4% or so has to go somewhere, and the state and national polling to this point has been utterly contradictory. In many swing states, Kennedy had been hurting Trump, but nationally, it seemed as if he was taking away somewhere around 2.5 points from each of them. There were other states in which it appeared he was hurting Harris. I really want to see polls in which Kennedy supporters are asked about the dead Central Park cub and the dead dog and now the dead whale and the story his daughter tells of him driving to cut off the head of that dead whale with a chainsaw and strapping it to the roof of their car for a 5-hour drive home, and how, quoting her, whale juice would pour into the windows of the car. We all had plastic bags over our heads with mouth holes cut out, but that was just normal day-to-day stuff for us. By the way, those quotes were in, naturally, Town and Country magazine, which is leading this month's issue with how to make your hands look younger. Don't pick up a goddamned whale head. That's one way. Anyway, I guess until we have some Kennedy-specific polling, he will simply remain Trump's cross to bear. Trump's cross to bear. Is this thing on? Hello? Trump is back trying to back out of the presidential debate, and he's not even doing it well, and the American political media is, as always, astonished. As soon as Harris replaced Biden, Trump claimed all debate agreements were off. Now he is enraged because she wants the mics always open, not muted. Not because he objects to the mics not being muted, but just because she wants it. Let me summarize this. Trump is trying to back out of the debate. He is hoping to be able to back out and blame her. He did this exact same thing with Biden, too, starting late last year. He is using as an excuse now an objection to something he agrees with. What is Harris doing? Harris, bluntly, is effing with him. And rather successfully. The Harris team has already proven to be the most successful anti-Trump entity in this fertile field of effing with him. And the media? They are making noises like sea lions over this. Like all this started yesterday morning. In fact, it started at 10 p.m. Eastern Sunday night. But of course, 99 out of 100 political reporters take the weekends off. And the other one only sticks around until the Sunday shows are over. And then it's hot and cold running mimosas for the rest of the day. Trump posted, I watched ABC fake news this morning, and you know it's really fake news because he capitalized it. Both lightweight reporter Jonathan Karl's ridiculous and biased interview of Tom Cotton, who was fantastic, and their so-called panel of Trump haters. And I ask, why would I do the debate against Kamala Harris on that network? Will panelist Donna Brazile give the questions to the Marxist candidate like she did for crooked Hillary Clinton? Will Kamala's best friend, who heads up ABC, do likewise? Where is little George Slopadopoulos hanging out now? Will he be involved? They've got a lot of questions to answer. Why did Harris turn down Fox, NBC, CBS, and even CNN? Stay tuned. Mini strokes. So Monday morning, the Harris camp then says it agreed to fulfill the second half of the Biden-Trump debate schedule that Trump agreed to. But when they did that, They insisted that the debate rules were still up for debate. And then hours later, Harris communications guru Brian Fallon, disclaimer, we used to be in that fantasy football league together, said, quote, "We have told ABC and the other networks seeking to host a possible October debate that we believe both candidates' mics should be live throughout the full broadcast. We suspect Trump's team has not even told their boss about this dispute because it would be too embarrassing to admit they don't think he can handle himself against Vice President Harris without the benefit of a mute button." As I find myself asking so often here, so recently, is it lol or is it lol? Wait, there's more lolling. Trump on his way yesterday to using Arlington National Cemetery as a political prop where he stood in front of soldiers' graves and smiled and gave a thumbs up. Trump, he didn't actually care about this.
Would you want the microphones muted in the debate whenever you're not speaking?
We agreed to the same rules. I don't know. It doesn't matter to me. I'd rather have it probably on, but the agreement was that it would be the same as it was last time. In that case, it was muted. I didn't like it the last time, but it worked out fine. I mean, ask Biden how it worked out. It was fine. And I think it should be the same. We agreed to the same rules. Same rules and same specifications. And I think that's probably what it should be. But they're trying to change it. The truth is they're trying to get out of it because she doesn't want to debate. She's not a good debater. She's not a smart person. She doesn't want to debate.
Trump will swing back to the ABC stuff, or why won't she go on Fox stuff presently? Depend upon it. He wants out. If he does debate, we will be doing another live podcast after it. I'm not making any firm plans for that night. But as I said at the start, he wants a muted mic. He gets a muted mic for the entire debate. I'm not sure how this is physically possible at this point, but as evidenced by the mishandling of the microphone story, the American political media is still getting worse. Gary Tuchman has been with CNN so long, we almost overlapped in the New York bureau. I left in 1984. He got there in 1990. It is hard to believe they will let him continue, at least continue in a prominent role, after this scandal over the, quote, undecided, unquote, focus group that he did. If you have not heard this, Gary Tuchman conducted a panel after Harris's acceptance speech at the convention. The panel was in Allentown, Pennsylvania, of 8 avowedly undecided voters. Having heard her speak, 6 of the 8 immediately said they were now ready to vote for her. The 7th was still undecided. The 8th said he was also now ready to vote for Trump. He's a man named Bryant Rosado, and after some pressing, he has claimed that not only did he go into the focus group intending to vote for Trump, but that he told CNN and in fact told Gary Tuchman personally that he was intending to vote for Trump. Tuchman, he says, approached him and a friend at a restaurant and asked who they were voting for, and they told him, quoting Rosado, "Crazy part is that CNN invited me knowing I was a Trump supporter. Then they said it'll be voters that are undecided, not Democrats. They told me to keep an open mind and to give Kamala a chance after the speech, since she's the new candidate after Biden, so I did." Hashtag Trump. CNN, which in the last 2 years has probably wasted 75% of the remaining credibility its originals and near originals like me built for it 4 decades ago, certainly did not help with a statement to the Midas Network, which pursued this story doggedly and thoroughly. Doggedly and thoroughly, in other words, exactly the way CNN did not pursue this story. Quoting the anonymous CNN spokesperson, mistakes included: when building the panel of voters who haven't decided on a candidate, all participants made it clear that they indeed hadn't made a final determination. This particular individual, who said he had supported Donald Trump in the past, expressed to us that after President Biden dropped out of the race, his mind became open, and he hadn't make a final decision on a candidate. Hadn't make. In this context, it is kind of hard to believe that CNN actually fired Chris Cillizza rather than making him, president of CNN worldwide. At 6 a.m. yesterday, Axios reminded the political world, and I'll give them this, they are good at reminders, that Vice President Harris's campaign had committed to at least one sit-down interview before the end of this month. The end of this month is Saturday. This is August. Next month will be September. The next major holiday is Labor Day. Quoting Axios, Vice President Harris's strategy for the 71-day sprint is built partly around trying to outwork former President Trump. Axios' Sophia Kai writes, why it matters, Harris is packing her campaign schedule this week, starting with a bus tour in southern Georgia. She'll also sit for her first interview as a presidential candidate. I'll just say that again. She'll also sit for her first interview as a presidential candidate. They committed to it. They just haven't said where yet. 6 hours after that, your boy Saliza umbraged, quoting, it's been 36 days since Joe Biden dropped out of the race and Kamala Harris emerged as the nominee. She's conducted 0 press conferences and 0 sit-down media interviews. She has taken less than 15 total questions from the media in any format. Unacceptable! 12:09 p.m. Eastern Time. I don't know which part I like best. The fact that he has either forgotten or ignored Harris's interview commitment, or the fact that he has either forgotten or ignored that when Harris has stopped for those questions, reporters have not rushed her with policy nuance, but instead with demands for reaction to the noises that have followed what has seemed like Trump's latest mini-stroke. Still, none of this, not the CNN uncommitted except he's voting for Trump, nor the latest Saliza self-beclowning, can top what the New York Times has now done. Another of its priceless guest op-eds, which are designed to put the satirist New York Times PitchBot account out of business, and then put the Times itself out of business. The headline of this guest op-ed, Trump can win on character. The content? The author thinks character means Trump settling on a nickname for Harris. The rest, I'll spare you. It's fascist bullshit. I would really reverse my opinion of the Times if just one time it printed one of these and instead of insulting everybody's intelligence, including the fascists, the Times simply repeated the words fascist bullshit 500 times each. I'd frame that. Then again, I'm the guy who, when he was the editor-in-chief of his high school newspaper, Will Bunch was my ace underclassman news reporter, we had an editorial literally pulled off the page by the headmaster of the school, came up to the newsroom and literally pulled the thing off the edition that was just going to the printers. Very dramatic, very impactful, but he left our offices without telling me what to put in its place. Nor did he bother to check before we actually shipped it off to the printers. So I simply printed out the word censored in big black letters, and we ran it where the editorial was supposed to be. But that's me. Anyway, I've left out the one joy of this remarkable Times self-own, and I might add op-ed author self-own. The Trump can win on character op-ed was written by Rich Lowry, editor-in-chief of National Review. And if you've been with me a while, you already know what's coming next. Rich Lowry, October 3rd, 2008, 4:08 p.m., National Review, the day after the vice presidential debate between Senator Joe Biden and Sarah Palin, who is still alive. Headline, Projecting Through the Screen by Rich Lowry. A very wise TV executive once told me that the key to TV is projecting through the screen. It's one of the keys to the success of, say, a Bill O'Reilly, who comes through the screen and grabs you by the throat. I read that in the legal papers, didn't I? Palin, too, projects through the screen like crazy. I'm sure I'm not the only male in America who, when Palin dropped her first wink, sat up a little straighter on the couch and said, "Hey, I think she just winked at me." And her smile, by the end, when she clearly knew she was doing well, it was so sparkling it was almost mesmerizing. It sent little starbursts through the screen and ricocheting around the living rooms of America. This is a quality that can't be learned. It's either something you have or you don't. And man, she's got it! Now he's writing op-eds for the Times. For the systemic and possible fatal problems of the Times, all I can say is this in that context. This, from Rich Lowry, was a fitting climax. Also of interest here, this all-new edition of Countdown, a top Trump aide complains that the Democrats had a guy on the Sunday shows who was so old he should be in a retirement home. Guess who the guy is younger than? And the operational head of ESPN, the former producer of the Dan Patrick Keith Olbermann Sports Center, is succeeded in his role by the other former producer of the Dan Patrick Keith Olbermann Sports Center. This is either testament to how easy I was to work with or how scarred you get after working with me. That's next. This is Sports Countdown.
This is Countdown with Keith Olbermann, my crazy friend.
Ahead of us on this all-new edition of Countdown, not only is the former producer of the Big Show 11 p.m. edition of ESPN SportsCenter the new operational chief at ESPN, succeeding the guy he succeeded 30 years ago, who had also been the producer of the Big Show edition of ESPN's 11 p.m. SportsCenter. But now it turns out me personally, managed to help kill off the best all-news radio station there ever was. And there is a newly rediscovered cassette of my debut as a professional newscaster, and the date is, if you are sitting down, please, July 25th, 1980. Ahead in a combined edition of Sports Center Central and things I promised not to tell. First, there are still more new idiots to talk about. The daily roundup of the miscreants, morons, and Dunning-Kruger effect specimens who constitute today's worst persons in the world. Besides me, the bronze, worse, Don Old. This did not seem to resonate for some reason, probably because we get it. He's having a series of mini strokes. We get it. Friday night, Saturday morning, he apparently posted on Truth Social. It's a brand name. It doesn't actually mean any of it's true. These are great patriots who work their hearts out to have a strong and powerful border, only to be harassed by border czar Kamala Harris, who wants the... That's the whole thing. These are great patriots who work their hearts out to have a strong and powerful... I'll spell it in a moment. Border, only to be harassed by border czar Kamala Harris, who wants the... That was it. Mini stroke. Powerful the Kofevi of 2024. POWERFULNNZ. QAnon will be able to explain that. Or a good neuropathologist. The runner-up, worser, Andrea Tantaros, former host of Fox's The Five. And how bad do you have to be at your job to be removed from The Five? This is where they let Dana Perino, possibly the stupidest human being alive, and Jesse Waters, who's runner-up or tied, out there every day to let their brains leak out of their ears on national television. Brains they can ill afford to lose, I might add. Andrea Tantaros used to be a host of that show, and then she got removed. And it wasn't just because she filed sexual harassment lawsuits against all the schmucks like Roger Ailes and Bill O'Reilly. Cheryl Atkinson, who also was once an actual news reporter for CBS, simply tweeted, "Kamala looks good." Andrea Tantaros, like 10 minutes later, subtweeted her. Cheryl Atkinson writes, "Kamala looks good." Andrea Tantaros writes, "So did Hitler. Impeccable manscaping and tailoring. You're just like the rest." Two things, Andrea. First of all, you've made Cheryl Atkinson look normal. Do you really want to be responsible for that? Then number two, manscaping, referring to Kamala Harris, first of all, impeccable manscaping and tailoring. Manscaping of Hitler. Do we know, Andrea, what manscaping means these days? In the popular lingo, what the kids mean when they say manscaping? Why do you know something about Hitler's manscaping? Also, I want to add something here. Even if you're just talking about Hitler's haircut here, have you seen pictures of Hitler's haircut and how uneven it was? I haven't seen that lopsided a haircut since J.V. Vance. But the winner, the circular gentleman, Jason Miller, the one accused of, slipping extra ingredients into his smoothies. Ron Filipkowski pointed this out. On Sunday, Jason Miller, still somehow a Trump advisor after all this. Well, on the ranks of how bad you have to be as a human being, he's probably only like the 1,000th worst person working for Trump out of the million. This was one of Kamala Harris's most consequential weeks in her political career, Jason Miller writes from D.C. Look at the commies and retreads the Dems had out on TV this Sunday. He writes, what retirement home did they pull Tom Daschle out of? Former Senate Majority Leader Tom Daschle was born on December 9th, 1947. Trump, on the other hand, was born on June 14th, 1946. Not only is Daschle younger than Trump, but he's 18 months younger than Trump. So the answer to the question, what retirement home did they pull Tom Daschle out of, is the one Trump should be in, with young Daschle feeding him porridge with a spoon. Jason Miller, today's worst person in the world. Never ask a question you don't know the answer to.
This is Sports Center. Wait, check that. Not anymore. This is Countdown with Keith Olbermann.
Sports for people who don't like sports. Actually, it's a combination sports for people who don't like sports and things I promised not to tell. Dateline, Bristol, Connecticut. Hello. ESPN has named Mike McQuaid as its new executive vice president of sports production. Basically, he succeeds longtime executive Norby Williamson. This is the part of the movie where I came in. If you saw this story online and you saw Mike McQuaid's picture, no, he's not wanted for anything. That's just how his photos always turn out. Always. There's no search for him in 17 Western states. No. But here's the point. In 1994, Norby Williamson was succeeded as the producer of the 11 p.m. Big Show edition of SportsCenter by Mike McQuaid. 30 years later, in 2024, Norby Williamson was succeeded as operational chief of ESPN by Mike McQuaid. A, patience is a virtue. B, then as now, all roads to power lead through Dan and Keith. Dateline, New York, New York. As I mentioned last week, the finest all-news radio station in history was to go off the air at midnight, Sunday, Monday. It happened. No reprieve. You maniacs, you blew it up. Ah, damn you. Ah, damn you all to hell. WCBS New York went off the air just shy of 57 years since its most recent newscast started in August 1967, and only when the veteran anchor Wayne Cabot gave the last station ID and the station went silent for a second at midnight did I realize I was one of the murderers. The next thing you heard after the silence, where News Radio 88 or 880 should have been, was ESPN Radio, which I launched in 1992. I mean, I broke the first big story on the first weekend, which gave the thing the credibility it would then use years later to destroy the best all-news radio station in history. The butterfly effect. Worse still, the first thing on ESPN Radio 880 was ESPN Radio SportsCenter. In 1992, when we launched the radio network, they used to call the sports news updates ESPN updates or something similar. They had a guy named Tony LaMonica do it, who used to point his finger out the window of the studio and cue somebody to do something that didn't have to be cued and didn't do. Anyway, we called them ESPN updates or something similar, and I said, why aren't you calling it ESPN Radio SportsCenter? That's the brand name. And they said, oh, no, can't do that. We don't want to dilute the brand name. And I kept pushing for it, and 6-7 months in, they renamed it ESPN Radio SportsCenter, which was the first thing you heard after WCBS went off the air. So I killed WCBS. I'm sorry. I won't do it again. All of which brings us to the number one story on the countdown and things I promised not to tell. And the broadcasting business just got a little smaller. And if you think this is it, no, sir. I worked at 5 different New York radio stations, most of them in my youth. 2 were as part of network gigs. I did sportscasts on the RKO radio network, and I would then go upstairs to WOR twice a day to do local sportscasts for them. Same at the ABC network and WABC. I even did news commentaries for WABC. I was a regular on WNEW and WNEW-FM here, and I appeared a couple of times on WINS here as part of work I was doing for its sister all-news station in L.A., KFWB. Out of those 5 outlets, RKO doesn't exist anymore. WNEW and WNEW-FM are long gone. I think they went out of business in 1992, at least WNEW did. KFWB Los Angeles is gone. I think they still have the call letters, but it ain't all news anymore. Hasn't been for 15 years. And the station I really wanted to work for was WCBS. I've told that story many times, including the story of the support I got as I was starting my career from the legendary news director at WCBS, the late Lou Adler. I kind of worked for WCBS. The job I did get at the start of my career was at UPI Radio, which, by the way, has been long out of business. WCBS used to use our reports from UPI all the time. That was the greatest validation I could get, to turn on the actual radio to my radio station and hear myself, a 20-year-old rookie, on there. But most of my local radio stationing was done on those 2 WNEWs, and in fact, I was looking for some old clips from CBS when I was reminded that the first time I actually did news anchoring for money, it was on a Friday afternoon in July 1980, when everybody else, and I mean everybody else in the news department at WNEW, was out sick or on vacation or something. I mean everybody. I had done the sports reporting that morning. I'd been there at 3 a.m. And as I was leaving at maybe 9 o'clock in the morning, the second of the 2 afternoon newscasters, they had 2 newscasters who worked in the afternoon. One did the top of the hour news, one at the bottom. Now, if a station has 2 newscasters, that's a lot. They had 2 newscasters on the same shift. And it was a music station. Anyway, the second of them, Charles Scott King, who did the bottom of the hour newscasts that were mostly sports anyway, he called in sick. So they then had to page the news director on his beeper to get him to approve the last option. Me. No audition, no test. They just said, well, he sounds okay, I guess, doing the sports. What are we going to do? Just put on horse racing results for an hour? So there I was, back at the station after a quick nap, maybe 4:30 in the afternoon I was on the air, doing drive time news on a big-time, highly rated news station in the biggest market in the country. So here's what I found while looking for those clips. Hit stop now if you do not want to hear my 21-year-old voice. The first is a quick report I did for UPI from the World Pool Championship as it appeared on WCBS on August 23rd, 1980. The WCBS anchor is Gary Moore.
Gene Balukas of Brooklyn has won the World Open Pool Championship. Keith Olbermann reports from the competition in Manhattan.
For the other women in professional pool, it is once again the same old story. Very good is just not good enough to unseat the reigning champ, Gene Balukas. The 21-year-old sharpshooter took her second straight World Open title and kept her record intact. She's unbeaten in major tournament play since 1973. The finals saw Balukas run through Billy Billing, marking a high run of 41 straight balls on her way to a 125 victory. The champ was pleased with her showing.
Each game I played, I had a good run in there, especially in the finals at the women's game. I had 2 good runs in there. And I'm pretty proud of myself. I think this is the tournament that I played my best in.
Gene Balukas, who besides her women's title, finished in the top third of the strong 63 competitor men's field. Keith Olbermann at Pool's World Open in New York.
And that's the sports at WCBS, All News 88.
And then a couple of complete newscasts from July 25th, 1980. Thank God I was exhausted. It covered up the terror on WNEW, Metro Media Radio in New York.
It's time now for Keith Olbermann. He was doing the morning sports when I was doing Ted's show last week. This gentleman is peripatetic, not to mention that he gets around a great deal for a young person. I'm Jim Lowe, and I hope you rejoin me in the Jim Lowe Music Hall. Straight ahead on WNEW, Metro Media Radio in New York.
WNEW News at 5:30. It's sunny and 92 degrees. I'm Keith Olbermann. There's been a 7th fatality from yesterday's explosion and fire at the factory building in Queens. The latest victim, 21-year-old Evelyn Rodriguez of Queens. Another 8 still reported in critical condition undergoing treatment at the New York Hospital's burn center. No major power problems reported after the conclusion of what turned out to be a rather brief public service electric and gas strike. An all-night bargaining session produced tentative agreement on a 2-year deal, providing an 8.5% raise the first year, a 9% hike the second. Some 5,000 clerical and electrical workers had struck the New Jersey power outlet last night. Security precautions reported tighter than ever at the Metropolitan Opera House now. This after Wednesday's murder of violinist Helen Agnes Middix. Police continuing their investigation, questioning now members of the Berlin Ballet Troupe who are scheduled to leave the city next week. Reports now that Ms. Middix died of injuries suffered as the result of her fall. The special Senate subcommittee that will investigate Billygate has announced plans to start its work on Tuesday. Full details on these stories and the rest of the news on the hour at 6 with Bruce Charles. Now in sports, Commissioner Lawrence O'Brien of the NBA has awarded the Knicks Seattle's first choice in next year's college draft. That, O'Brien's response to a court-ordered restructuring of the compensation the Sonics got 2 years ago when the Knicks signed away Marvin Webster from Seattle. O'Brien gave the Knicks the choice of the choice or the $275,000 that he valued the choice at. Knicks are expected to go for the draft pick. They say, though, they're not pleased with the O'Brien decision. They still want Lonnie Shelton back. Turnabout, though possibly not fair play at the Moscow Olympics this afternoon. Nadia Comaneci, originally placed by the scores in a tie for the silver in the women's floor exercises, saw her marks upgraded so that she wound up sharing the gold with her arch-rival Nellie Kim. Earlier, Nadia took a gold in her own right in the beam competition. A bunch of British Olympians had something to wave the Union Jack about today. Alan Wells winning the gold in the 100-meter dash. Steve Ovett and Sebastian Coe both earning semifinal victories in the 800 meters. They'll square off along with 6 others in the finals tomorrow. Daley Thompson of Great Britain moved into the early lead after 3 of the decathlon events. Alexander Dadiatin, the Russian male gymnast, took home a loot bag full of 6 medals today alone. 1 gold, 4 silvers, 1 bronze. Dadiatin with 8 medals at the games so far. The local sports, Mets at home, Yanks on the road, after this.
This, the Australian airline.
The Yankees and Royals meet for the second time in a week starting tonight in Kansas City. Louis Tiant coming off the disabled list to start this evening against the Royals. And happy to have him back is Yankee second baseman Willie Randolph.
Well, Tiant gives us that experience, of course. He's been there, and when you get down to the dog days, which we're approaching right now, he comes too big for you. He likes the hot weather, and like I said before, Louis is that old craftsman who knows what to do when the situation arises.
Randolph and the Yanks are 8.5 games in front of the East in the American. KC up by 11 in the West. The Royals have reportedly given third baseman George Brett a neat $5 million for a 5-year contract. The Mets are home to Cincinnati, looking for better things than last weekend's 1-3 record against the Reds at Riverfront Stadium. Pitchers tonight in the opener of the 9-game homestand: Paul Moskow for the Reds, Pat Zachary for the Mets. Not a single game in progress in baseball right now, though momentarily doubleheader action starts at Philadelphia, the Braves and the Phils, and at Cleveland, the Angels and Indians. Starting at 6 o'clock, the Red Sox play 2 at Minnesota. The stocks, the Dow Jones Industrial Average down 8.02 today, closing at just more than 918. The American also down 1.45 to settle at 316.47. And the over-the-counter NASDAQ index dropped 0.29 to close at 169.63. The WNEW Weather Center forecast for New York City and vicinity: tonight clear and mild, the low near 70. We'll have one of those full moons as well. Tomorrow mostly sunny, the humidity going up, and the high in the low 90s, just in case you forgot what the early part of the week was like. Tomorrow night fair and warm, low in the mid-70s, and on Sunday partly cloudy, hot and humid, again the high in the low 90s. Right now it's sunny, 92 degrees, the humidity 27%, the winds are at 5 miles an hour, and they're from the southwest now. I'm Keith Olbermann, WNAW News, with Jim Lowe.
$5 million for a 5-year contract? Woo! But you know something? It isn't steady. They're out of work 6 months of the year.
In the Jim Lowe Music Hall.
When you come back, we'll have a big band sweep and another Nostalgia Trivia Hall of Fame question straight ahead on WNEW Metro Media Radio in New York.
WNEW News at 6:30. It's sunny and 90 degrees. I'm Keith Olbermann. The news being brought to you by the New York Bank for Savings. Violinist Helen Hagnes Middix was alive when she fell 60 feet to her death down an air shaft at the Metropolitan Opera House. At the statement today of the City Medical Examiner's Office, severe fractures to the skull, ribs, and legs apparently caused Miss Middix's death. Increased security procedures reported today at the Met, including the use of ID cards by employees. A 7th person has now died as the result of the terrible explosion and fire at the metal factory in Queens yesterday. Another 8 people still in critical condition at New York Hospital's Burns Center. The PSE&G strike is over less than 24 hours after it began. An all-night bargaining session producing a tentative agreement that would, if approved, give 5,000 clerical and electrical workers raises of 8.5% and then 9% over 2 years. And the two sides in the PATH dispute have been called back to the bargaining table for a meeting. They will meet next Wednesday. Full details on these stories and the rest of what's happening on the 7 o'clock news with Bruce Charles. Now in sports, Preston Gomez, who took over the Chicago Cubs after the end of last season, was fired this afternoon as the team's manager. Third base coach Joey Amalfitano, who took over last season when Herman Franks resigned as the Cub manager, has again been named acting field boss. Chicago is 38-52 right now, in last place in the NL East. They're 13 games back of front-running Pittsburgh. Baseball tonight, the Yankees are at Kansas City with Louis Tiant trying to make a successful comeback after 3 weeks on the disabled list. Rich Gale to pitch for the Royals. At Shea Stadium, the Reds are in town to start off a 9-game homestand for the Mets. It'll be Paul Moskow against Pat Zachary. 3 doubleheaders underway in the major leagues right now. In Philadelphia, the Phillies lead the Braves 2-1 in the 3rd inning of the first game there. Angels over the Indians 3-0 in the second game of the first game of their doubleheader, second inning rather. And the Red Sox and Twins scoreless in the first at Minnesota. The Jets and Giants battled to a 10-10 tie at Hofstra this afternoon in the rookies scrimmage. Second-round draft choice Ralph Clayton outshined top Jet pick Lamb Jones. Clayton with a 5-yard touchdown run and 4 catches for 48 yards. The Giants' TD came on a Scott Brunner to Danny Pittman 4-yard pass. At the Olympics, yesterday Nadia Comaneci had her score readjusted downwards. That took a gold medal away from her. Today she had the tally upgraded, as Patty Berman reports, and she wound up with 2 gold medals.
The final competition in women's gymnastics was an event charged with high emotion and political tension. Patty Berman, Moscow.
Also at Moscow, Russia's male gymnastics whiz Alexander Dadiatin won no fewer than 6 medals, a gold, 4 silvers, and a bronze in competition today. The Soviets with 34 gold, 76 total medals. Second place East Germany has only 11 gold, just 47 total. All the Knicks will say is, we're not happy. We'll have more on that story after this from the New York Bank for Savings.
So put your hard-earned money to work at the New York Bank for Savings, the Beehive Bank. We give you more. Member FDIC.
The Knicks are not happy about NBA Commissioner Larry O'Brien's decision this afternoon that they should receive Seattle's first choice in next year's college draft. That O'Brien's way of restructuring the Marvin Webster compensation case from 2 years ago. About a month ago, a court said he had to give the Knicks something back from that compensation. Mike Burke and the gang at the Garden were hoping for Lonnie Shelton. Jim Simons is 62 yesterday, is 70 today, but he's still up by a stroke at the Greater Hartford Open. Patty Hayes and Sally Little up by 1 at the LPGA event on the island at Jericho. And Yonkers Raceway will reopen tonight after more than a week of quiet due to the horse owners' boycott. Down day on Wall Street, the Dow Jones dropped 8.02, closing at 918.09. The American index dropped 1.45, closing at about 316.5. And the over-the-counter NASDAQ lost 0.29, finishing up at 169.63. The WNAW Weather Center forecast for New York City and vicinity: it was a nice day. It will be a nice evening. Clear and mild, low near 70, the full moon out tonight. Mostly sunny, getting stickier tomorrow as the humidity goes up, high in the low 90s. Tomorrow night, fair and warm, low in the mid-70s. Sunday, a lot like tomorrow, only more cloudy, hot, humid, high in the low 90s. Right now, sunny, an even 90 degrees, 32 Celsius. Humidity stands at 32%. Winds coming from the southwest at 6 miles an hour. The news has been brought to you by the New York Bank for Savings. I'm Keith Olbermann, WNAW News. Back now to Jim Lowe.
This is WNEW New York, 1130 on your dial, Metro Media Radio.
Stay tuned right now for Keith Olbermann and the news and the sports. In 5 minutes, Stan Martin. 5 minutes, Mr. Martin, on WNEW, Metro Media Radio in New York.
WNAW News at 8 o'clock. It's clear, 86 degrees. I'm Keith Olbermann. Security is tight, the atmosphere tense at Lincoln Center this evening, where the Metropolitan Opera will go on with the show. New security procedures, such as the use of ID cards by employees entering the Opera House, went into effect today after Wednesday's murder of violinist Helen Hagnes Middix. More on the circumstances of the violinist's death released today. Mona Rivera has a report.
It was a gruesome death. I'm Mona Rivera, WNEW News.
The explosion and fire at that Queens factory happened yesterday, but the suffering and the tragedy appear to be stretching out to many days. The death toll now 7 after 42-year-old Louis Cruz of Manhattan died early this morning, and 21-year-old Evelyn Rodriguez died at 2:45 this afternoon. Miss Rodriguez was the fourth to die of injuries since the explosion. 3 died on the scene. 8 are still reported in critical condition from the blast, 3 with burns over 70% of their bodies. Their prospects for survival very poor. Not all the news is grim this Friday night. The Public Service electric and gas strike over less than a day after it started. PSE&G reaching tentative settlement this afternoon with 5,000 electrical and clerical workers who'd walked out last night. Utility spokesman Art Lenahan details the pact.
We have reached a tentative agreement with the negotiating team of the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. The agreement calls for an 8.5% increase in wages during the first year, 8.5% the first year, and a 9% increase in the second year.
Union approval still necessary before it's official. Maybe, just maybe, things will be on the verge of breaking in the seemingly endless path strike. The federal mediator involved has directed representatives of the Port Authority and Local 1330 of the Carmen to go back to the negotiating table, and that they will next Wednesday at 11 a.m. Nationally, Republican presidential nominee Ronald Reagan told a Los Angeles news conference today he expects to receive personal attacks from President Carter during the campaign for the White House. As to what Carter is up to as campaign 1980 swings into high gear, here is Walter Rogers from Washington.
But privately, Carter aides are deeply concerned about the political problems created by the president's brother Billy, spokesman Jody Powell acknowledging this is an extremely difficult time for us. Walter Rogers at the White House.
New developments in the Billy Carter story seemingly coming by the hour now. Attorney General Benjamin Civiletti saying now that he and President Carter had discussed Billy's involvement with Libya back last month. The Justice Department's Internal Security Division responded to the revelation by launching an investigation into whether or not Civiletti's involvement in the Billy Carter mess was in violation of the law or of department regulations. In sports, the National Basketball Association has awarded the Knicks the first-round choice belonging to Seattle in the next college draft. That part of the reworking of the Marvin Webster compensation. The Knicks say they're not happy with that. Nadia Comaneci won 2 gold medals at the Olympics today, earning the gold in the beam, sharing the gold in the floor exercises with her arch-rival Nellie Kim. The Giants and Jets battled to a 10-10 tie in their rookie scrimmage at Hofstra. Yonkers reopens this evening, and Preston Gomez has been fired as manager of the Chicago Cubs, Coach Joey Amalfitano taking over as a temporary replacement. The WNEW Weather Center forecast for New York City and vicinity. Tonight, clear and mild, low about 70. Tomorrow, it'll be sunny and warm again, high in the low 90s, but there will be lots of the humidity. Tomorrow night, fair and warm, low in the mid-70s. And wrapping up the weekend on Sunday, partly cloudy, hot and humid, the high back up to the low 90s. Right now, the temperature 86 degrees, 30 degrees Celsius. It's clear with the humidity standing at 53%. Winds from the northwest at 9 miles an hour. I'm Keith Olbermann, WNEW News, with Stan Martin.
Garner, here at WNEW New York with Stan Martin.
WNEW News at 9 o'clock. It's clear, 83 degrees. I'm Keith Olbermann. The bizarre murder of violinist Helen Hagnes Middix took another strange twist this afternoon. The city's chief medical examiner, Dr. Elliot Gross, revealing that a day-long autopsy shows the Metropolitan Opera performer was alive when she was thrown from the roof of the Opera House down an air shaft to her death. Mrs. Middix killed by a combination of severe fractures to the skull, the ribs, and the limbs. The police investigating the murder have redoubled their efforts, fearing vital information may be lost when the visiting Berlin Ballet Company leaves the city on Sunday. Mrs. Middix was accompanying that group the night she was killed. The explosion and fire that killed 3 at the Queens factory yesterday has claimed yet another victim. We get a report from Peggy Stockton.
At 2:45, Evelyn Rodriguez became the 7th fatality of the explosion of the Vogue Metalcraft Company. I'm Peggy Stockton, WNEW News.
Some good news tonight. The Public Service electric and gas strike is over. 5,000 electrical and clerical workers to get raises of 8.5% the first year, 9% the second, if the tentative agreement is approved. Maybe the PATH strike is next for settlement. The federal mediator says the Port Authority and striking carmen will return to the bargaining table next Wednesday morning. The strike has dragged on for 7 weeks. Now, the Attorney General of the United States appears to be involved in the unfolding Billygate episode. Benjamin Civiletti revealing this afternoon that he and President Carter spoke about Billy's involvement with the government of Libya. They spoke about it in June. That revelation set a chain of events rolling. Marilee Cox picks up the story.
Not long after Attorney General Civiletti revealed that he had indeed talked with the president in a casual conversation about his department's probe of Billy Carter's ties with Libya, the Justice Department's own internal investigative unit announced it had opened an inquiry to determine whether Civiletti committed an obstruction of justice. Marilee Cox, Washington.
And success today for New York City's Bat Squad. The Special Health Department bat team caught a harmless red bat who'd been flapping around the hallway of a Brooklyn apartment. He was the Bat Squad's first catch of the 1980 bat season, and they named him Ed the Red Bat. Sports and the weather after this.
Save money with oil heat. It's the better alternative.
In sports, the Yankees and Royals are underway at Kansas City. Royals up 2-0 in the bottom of the second of that game. At the game where the Yankees' Louis Tiant is hoping to make his comeback from the disabled list. He was out for a month. The Mets and Reds at Shea. Mets up 1-0 in the third. This afternoon in the majors, Cleveland beat California 9-8 in the first of 2 at Cleveland Stadium. Also in baseball, the Chicago Cubs have fired manager Preston Gomez. Gomez in his first year with the team. Coach Joey Amalfitano named interim skipper of the Cubs. At the Olympics today, Nadia Comaneci won a gold medal and shared a second one, earning the top spot in the balance beam, sharing the medal with Nellie Kim in the floor exercises. And it's football time again. Jets and Giants battled to a 10-10 tie in the rookie scrimmage at Hofstra. The WNEW Weather Center forecast for New York City and vicinity. Clear and mild tonight, low around 70. Tomorrow getting a bit sticky, high in the 90s. Sunny, high humidity. Tomorrow night it should be fair, low in the mid-70s. Then on Sunday, another muggy day, partly cloudy, hot, humid, high again in the low 90s. Right now it's 83 degrees, 28 degrees Celsius. It's clear. The humidity stands at 33%. Winds from the west at 5 miles an hour. I'm Keith Olbermann, WNEW News on The Stan Martin Show.
Bonga, 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 bonga. I would pay a lot of money for a clean version of the bongas. That's the best I can get. The bongas, the legendary news noise of WNEW radio. I've done all the damage I can do here. Having killed off WCBS, I would say that's really is all the damage I can do for the time being anyway. For one day at least. Thank you for listening. Please share this podcast with somebody who does not listen. Brian Ray and John Philip Chanel, the musical directors of Countdown, arranged, produced, and performed most of our music. Mr. Chanel handled orchestration and keyboards. Mr. Ray was on the guitars, bass, and drums. It was produced by TKO Brothers. Our satirical and pithy musical comments are by the best baseball stadium organist ever, Nancy Faust. The sports music is the Olbermann theme from ESPN2, written by Mitch Warren Davis, courtesy of ESPN Inc., which reminds me, that deal was made with Norby Williamson. I better call McQuaid and see if I can still use that music. Anywho, other music arranged and performed by the group No Horns Allowed. My announcer today was, fitting with the ESPN theme, my friend Tony Kornheiser of ESPN. Everything else was, as usual, pretty much my fault. That's Countdown for this, the 71st day until the 2024 presidential election, the 1,328th day since convicted felon Dementia J. Trump's first attempted coup against the democratically elected government of the United States. Use the September 18th sentencing hearing if it happens. Use the mental health system. You've got this, President Biden. Use presidential immunity to stop him from doing it again while we still can. And anti-Semitic, anti-immigration, gun nut Republicans, please stop shooting at Trump already. The next scheduled countdown is tomorrow. Bulletins as the news requires. Until the next one, I'm Keith Olbermann. Good morning, good afternoon, good night, and good luck.